Hey Yin, how are you?
Hi, Sina. I'm good. Thanks so much for having me here.
It's my pleasure to have you on the podcast, and it's been a while, like recording for me, to be fair, because I was on holiday. Not that people would know, because I still have like episodes out. But yeah, it's been a while for me. I've got a slight cold, but it's all right. Like, still going ahead with the recordings. But it's really excited to have you on the podcast because I know we've been like similar circles before, and like yeah, just very excited to have
Mm.
you on to talk about everything that you're doing. And you have a very like different background, like doing multiple different things. Um, and I think yeah, it'll be great to hear about your background, like how you've gone to where you are right now.
I basically had a passion for website design, graphic design since I was very young. And that kind of sort of started just from you know, creating websites with friends from a website called Pixo, kind of online blogging a bit. But kind of in turn, it got me into learning about HTML and CSS and PHP when I was about like 12 years old. And I think like I kind of felt that I would go down like the medicine path. Sort of like my family sort of like from that area. But then after sort of looking into it, and also like in high school, being really inspired by one of my teachers who pushed me to choose computer science as one of my degrees, that kind of sort of started my path to tech. So I went to University of St. Andrews to for computer science. Um, was a great 4 years, learned so much, but I felt there was something missing when it comes to sort of business side of things, learning about how to become an entrepreneur, which is something that I always aspired to be. Um, I was sort of specializing in human computer interaction during my dissertation at St. Andrews. And I had an idea to create some sort of revolutionary tool to make the use of computers more efficient. And that sort of was my personal statement when I applied to Imperial for my master's. So I applied for the Innovation Entrepreneurship Management course, came to London for my master's, and thought that this master's would teach me how to become an entrepreneur in maybe 5, 10 years, but not knowing how entrepreneurial and um, how resourceful Imperial was when it came to pushing people to start new businesses straight out of uni. Um, had an idea in first semester, and that's sort of where the first nugget of entrepreneurship kind of began.
Mm.
So yeah.
So that like yeah, talk to me about that. So that's where it started, I guess, is like your first taste of entrepreneurship. Is that first business that I guess got a few accolades, and then it kind of went to the next step and like where you are now. So how did it?
Yeah. So it started off as sort of trying to kill two birds with one stone, where firstly, every project in Imperial Business School was group based. So I was super lucky with my team. We were a very awesome team. I was the computer scientist. There was an electrical engineer, a chemical engineer, a mechanical engineer, and a psychologist. So we were like a super strong team. And we all had a passion for sustainability. And that was sort of the topic that we wanted to have underlying. And based on one of the mechanical engineer's dissertations, which was about waste management and how we can turn something that people view nasty and gross and useless and turn into something more. And that was where Coelection was born in first semester. So our idea was that we took used cooking oil specifically from households and turned it into biodiesel. So why households? Because actually, if even if you're the smallest fish and chip shop in the UK, you have to give your oil. You can't throw it down the drain, and they actually pay you for you to give your oil. So this is actually like a commodity. Like it's actually some people that they don't know that they could turn their fried food into actual resourceful materials. So
That's really interesting. And then, so what happened to that business eventually?
yeah, so we ran it, took it to different modules, so got like some good grades whilst also building a business at the same time. Applied to so many different competitions, got rejected by so many until we got into Imperial Business Pitch, which we're competing against Imperial College London, Imperial College Business School, so like PhDs, MBAs, masters at the time, and it was a 1 month like kind of coaching training course, and then there was like the final competition, and fortunately we won first place, which was such a huge validation for us. And that's why we were like, hey, we could turn this like school project that we thought was just like a small thing into something more. And that's where we were on the cusp of like I was interning at like a venture capital firm at the time. And I tried it out for a while, but I kind of just knew that I wanted to become an entrepreneur like right there and then. Also at the time, visa wise as well, had to sort that out. Did not want to leave the UK, and basically got sponsored by Imperial to work on this startup for 2 years.
What was the sort of like, I guess driving factor. So you were in VC, and like, I guess like what was the driving factor for you to say like, yeah, entrepreneurship is for me? Because I guess like you were still fairly young at that point. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, you are still young now. Like it's, but what was this? What was the sort of like turning point
Hmm.
for you? Like, what made you want to go into that direction?
I think I guess truthfully told, I guess I like being a leader myself. I think now that I've been in startups for a while, I don't know if I could go back to working in corporate again, just because like I think it's very different when when you run things by yourself, you have your own vision. It's sort of like your power. You make your own hours. You put in as much work, and it's like your baby that you're growing. Whereas when you're working on for someone else, it's not as like motivating. And I think at the time, the industry that I was in, this specific firm, I it was interesting, but not interesting enough for me to pursue this long term. And I just sort of like yearned to kind of like go back to being back in the competition phase where I was like working on core election every single day, grinding, talking to customers. Like it was super exciting for that. But then going back to like 9 to 5 corporate, it was just, yeah, not the one for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to this about this on the podcast like multiple times, and also other podcasts as well. Like, I think 9 to 5 is obviously very, very good, and if you find
Hmm.
happiness from 9 to 5, then you've completed it. Like you won a life. That's the end goal of what everyone's trying to do is to find happiness, and if you find it through that, then like well done. But like obviously not everyone's built that way. So the reason why I'm the same as you, like it's not for me the whole like, oh yeah, working for someone else. That's not what it is. It's more the fact of I don't like it when there's like over imposing rules, like what corporate does. Like it's just like loads of rules
Yeah.
for the sake of having rules, and it's just like this is the way that we've done things for multiple years, so this is the way we're going to do things now. And it's like I hate that sort of environment, and I think that's what entrepreneurship and startups offer you. And I think that's why this podcast, like I said, done so well, and there's so many people listening to it, and so many guests that I've got
Mm-hmm.
on it, is because young people right now, that's what they love to do. Is like they really thrive off the impact.
100% agreed. I think knowing that, whatever you give in 110%, like it does come back towards you.
Yeah,
Whereas when you give it to another company, it benefits other people, not really yourself. And of course, it's also you being able to work on your passion, like what you really like. And yeah, I think it's very fun. And growing anything from ground up is always a very exciting, and it's scary but exciting.
so you got addicted to that feeling of like growing something by yourself. And so what was the next step after your first startup? So I think like COVID hit, as
Hmm.
you said, I guess, like what was the next step?
Yeah, so essentially, we wanted to install sort of like drop off points for people to put their used cooking oil. So we had like, some things in place with schools, with commercial buildings. However, COVID happened. Nobody was going to school. Nobody was going to work, and sort of kind of operations kind of halted. I'm on a visa here, and I also felt that like I had to do something. Just because something stopped, I wanted to see. So I kind of delved back into sort of like what is like my current problem that I faced, and going back to being a first time founder, I was like, I did not like financial modeling. Keeping up with accounting softwares was such a pain. I had to, I basically just had to pay an accountant to handle everything for me because I just
Yeah,
did not want to do it. And a lot of SMEs face the same because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, bankers, consultants were the ones to start businesses. But nowadays, it's engineers, it's content creators, it's, the average Joe. And they don't have any financial training in hand, like most people don't. So I wanted to create kind of like a digital CFO where SMEs at the beginning can have someone that kind of like can support them, have a platform where they can connect their accounting softwares, and their bank account, and have all their needs right in front of them. Because when I worked in VC, there were so many businesses that mostly like they died because they didn't raise in time. They ran out of money. And if they had known, like if they saw their runway really clearly or their burn rate and sort of tackled that and see all their expenses, all their reoccurring expenses in one place, that could be a way for them to kind of survive a bit longer, or survive. Yeah.
so how did you start that? I mean, I guess because given that you got a computer science background, was it just like you
Mm.
developing all these things by yourself at one point?
Yeah, so I had a really great co-founder who was also technical too. It's funny because I was the one with the computer science degree. He was the one with the economics degree, but we both kind of switched. So he was the CTO and I was a CEO. But we both know how to code. We both know how to build. So I built mobile apps before, and so we basically started building like the pitch deck, the mock-ups, everything together. And After about maybe 6 7 months, when we felt there was kind of overwhelming to kind of like keep up with all the new features, we hired two developers so that we can have the business operations. But yeah, it's always super useful having someone that has a technical side too. It helps a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. So I guess like what was that did that startup like scratch that itch of like starting something new? Because I guess you weren't doing it for university at that point,
Mm.
you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah, I think also coming from like sustainability, clean tech to fintech, oof, that was such a huge difference. Like the amount of like interest, like especially when we're B2B SaaS fintech, like that's like, music to VC's ears. So when it came to like talking to a lot of people, there were a lot of people that were really interested. And especially like with SMEs, like SMEs is such an underserved market. There's so many problems that they face. So there were so many issues. Like it came to a point where every customer interview, we had like 30 features that people wanted. We were like, oh my god, this is super impossible um, to create all 30. So it was just like a lot of information all at once, which was like a new world for me because like clean tech sustainability, it's a bit more niche. Oil, use cooking oil. It was a very niche kind of like target audience. Like everything was just like blown up to like times 100. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So how did you handle that? Like I guess like it's a very different business in itself, right? Like it's massively
Mm.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was so we basically also went back to our imperial roots. Essentially applied for different competitions so that we could get our first round of funding. I think it's so amazing how much supportive Imperial has been to my startup career. I think what was not for that jumpstart fundraising. I think and also once you win something, that exposure that comes with it, like it's incredible. So thanks to Imperial, we got support, we got coaching, for the Venture Catalyst Challenge, which is Imperial's biggest competition. We won the digital and fintech track and got our first round of funding from that. Then, because of that, we got put in front of like different other accelerators and other VCs who wanted to sort of provide support. A lot of angels. We actually one of our angels at the time. We met him as one of the judges for Venture Capital Challenge, and he was like the head of fintech at Visa, which is like such a synergy. Like, and we met him thanks to Imperial. So after that, we applied to FinTech Innovation Lab, which is part of Accenture, and we applied last year. Got rejected. We were such a baby company, like we were like a month old, and then thanks to getting that first round of funding and sort of validating our market, we were like the youngest company to be part of the cohort, and yeah, that also helped us a lot. It was an incredible experience. We essentially this fintech innovation lab, it puts us in front of all the major banks and allows you to sort of pitch your ideas to them. We were too early stage, unfortunately, so we didn't get to utilize the accelerator to its fullest, but we met so many incredible people.
Was this with Penny? This is with Pennychain.
Savium. So
Say
this
like
is
which is
the
what
first.
the name was
Sorry, the
before.
second idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like that's extraordinary. And like at that point as well, you didn't did you didn't have like paying customers or anything. It was the idea and like initial sort of I guess. Do you have any like traction at that point?
Yeah, so we were just validating it. We were also waiting for a banking license as well because in order we couldn't charge anybody because we need to have our FCA license in place. So it was just whilst we were waiting for that, building the platform, we were just doing lots of customer validation, understanding like how can we find our beachhead, and things like that, and also cutting down the list of 30 features and coming up with like five most important ones.
So like, how did you pitch that? I guess Savium at the point where you were just like validating everything, and you were waiting for the license, but you still managed to
Hmm.
sort of get like interest from like fintech at Visa and like other sort of
Hmm.
like big angels. Like, is there a different pitching style when you're pitching that compared to say like the sustainability company where you already had like contracts in place?
Hmm. I do think that when it comes to sort of like B2B SaaS or any sort of like sort of SaaS fintech side of things, what you just need is at least like a semi decent looking mock-up for you to show your vision. Um, Understanding the markets really, really well, having sort of telling other people, I've spoken to this many people, I've done this many interviews. And I think that was just enough for us to be in front of people because people know that we done our research. We're also, how does our experience relate? Like, why are we the ones to build the startup? And I think the team is actually one of the most important aspects of it. So as long as like, you show like a strong team that makes sense, you have a rough mock-up in mind, and all these things, it pretty much, no matter what industry, like you can be in front of anyone.
That's really, really interesting because I think people, especially young people, they're like, I need to get this so much traction before I can get in front of these certain people and then even be considered for investment, let alone like
Mm-hmm.
be in the room, right? So like,
Yeah.
but then you're saying, yeah, as long as like the team is good, the pitch is good, you've got decent mock-ups, you've got like decent research statistics and stuff like that, with enough sort of, I guess, connections, hard work, networking, you can get into those sort of rooms.
Yeah. 100%. And it's sort of having the confidence, like, I'm building this. I'm the best person to build this right now. And no one else is. I understand it a lot more. Just proving that to people, it's kind of like just a psychology game, really, where you have to kind of show that, just because you don't have an IP or you don't have like a full app that's been launched, like you just have to be like confident about it, and that's enough to get in front of the door.
Yeah, so you got in the front of the door, like you got in the door with quite a lot of people, right? You said like fintech at Visa. How much money did you like raise, I guess, like to give people an idea with that sort of like pitch deck, with that sort of like at that stage that you were at?
Yeah, so prior to Techstars, all we raised was just from that, from Imperial's funding. So that was 10K. Like that was it, pretty much. And then we pretty much bootstrapped a lot throughout that stage. Us as founders, we weren't getting a salary, but we just tried to like, just try to like make make ends meet. Have other projects on the side that we try to like get some side income and stuff like that. So you don't really need a lot to jumpstart. You just sort of, yeah, like I mentioned, just sort of talking to people. The more you talk to customers, the more you also understand how to like quicker you'll pivot as well. Because we pivoted a lot until we got into Savium. um, and yeah.
I would quite like to ask you about this, Yin, because so I think what you've really expressed is like the strength that I can see from your journey is the strength to be able to say like, I want to move on to the next thing and pivot and then put your all into that. And I guess like
Hmm.
saying like I'm going to stop doing this and start doing this other thing, or I feel like that's a big strength that's very underrated in like what young people are doing. So I guess what is what is the secret of like pivoting more like from a personal standpoint of like, I guess, moving on from something that
Hmm.
you're doing?
Yeah, so I think failing fast is one motto that I have where it's like I want to just validate it. And if it's some things are not sticking too well and the market's not right, like, you know, being an entrepreneur, like you're supporting yourself, like there's no one else that's paying you. You kind of just don't really have like the freedom to kind of just like waste time on an idea for like a year. So I think also going to Techstars, that really taught me a lot, where you can actually find out like the answers like pretty quickly rather than wasting like half a year on it. And I think now with this new idea that we're having, started it like 3 weeks ago, and now we're trying to see a new market, hire people to put out flyers around, advertise there, and and we've been getting a lot of good responses. And I think if I don't get a good response, then I just know that something's not quite right. Maybe not the right timing, not the right idea, not the enough people interested in it, and just move on from there and just sort of dive deep. And these customer interviews, they actually bring out so much. And I think thanks to these customer interviews, I got to know my next idea because someone was like, "Wait, but this is not my problem, but this is."
Yeah, yeah. What would you say, I guess, is the point in time, I guess? Like, is there a point in time where you can say, like, yeah, now's the time to pivot? Like, I'm just thinking, like, young people listening, it's like it might be seen as like a sign of weakness, as in like stopping doing
Mm-hmm.
one thing to move on to something else. Like it might be seen as like a
Mm-hmm.
failure
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever that means to them, or like to what they
Mm-hmm.
think other people think. So, like, what is the point of time that you think's the best time to pivot, I guess?
It's a mixture of factors. So, one is that, you yourself have to understand that this new idea makes sense, makes even more sense to you than the previous idea. You're just like, okay, like, wait, this makes sense. I think with all the businesses that I've run, I've always made it that isn't my problem as well. And so, for example, with the oil thing, I have an Asian family. We cook a lot. We fry a lot of things, and I would have problems with clogged pipes, for example. Second thing with Savium, I hated financial modeling. I hated looking at Xero QuickBooks. I wanted to create something for myself. And with this new idea, with Pennychain as well, I wanted to get to crypto, but didn't know, I was too scared to, and felt like it was too risky. Spare change, that kind of element. Kind of like that's one element where you kind of have that understanding. Secondly, market signals, right? So is it a good time now? Like, do the people that you've been speaking to, do they get the idea? And will that solve their current problems and needs? And yeah, and the third thing, I guess, timing as well. Looking into whether there's other competitors now, what are they doing well and what are they not doing well that they're missing out on. And I think it's just a mixture of things. And when these sort of puzzle pieces come into place, you kind of have to be quite quick with it. Like you have to push yourself to like sit down and like have like a really strong brainstorming session to figure out whether you want to move. And I think if it feels right, that's when you'll know. Like you'll know in your gut that it's time to move on from the old idea. Because I always knew when when the last idea was kind of fizzling out, I was like, maybe it's time to like look into something else.
Hmm. But the experience from Pennychain, I guess, like motivates you to move on to this new business that you're launching like fairly soon,
Hmm.
called Iconic.
Yes.
So, like, what gave you the idea for that?
Yeah, so going back into my principle where like, investing is such an important thing. For a lot of people to get, for how rich people get rich, they don't work harder. They don't work longer hours. They basically diversify their portfolio and put it into, different alternative assets or like normal assets, and they let their money grow while they're asleep. For a lot of people, it takes a long time for them to realize that. And by the time that they're maybe 30 or older, they're just like, oh crap, why didn't I just start investing when I was like 18 or 20 or younger, So I think our idea caters more towards like Gen Z and millennials. And we want to see like what gets them ticking. What would get me ticking? Like I love, I love jewelry, I love fashion. And, for example, an Hermes Birkin bag, it appreciates 14% every year compared to the S&P, which is 8%. Like it's actually, long term investing in a Patek Nautilus, you can actually get more of your returns than most stocks in crypto. And especially with luxury and these physical assets, people can understand it because it's like actually right in front of their face. They see like the worth of it, the hype, sort of like going into like the cloud of it and stuff like that. And that's the idea where we want to make it more accessible. People cannot afford to pay $500,000 on like, some rare collectible Pokemon card or some vintage wine. So we want to sort of kind of, democratize that and make it more accessible. And that was the idea
Hmm.
behind Iconic.
So, how did you start like a brand like that? Given the technical, like I'm in the Web3 space as well. Given the technical sort of like infrastructure you need to build, like how do you start that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I know the answer is like you don't build all the tech immediately. Like start out
For
somewhere.
sure.
Like so, what's the what do you think about that?
Honestly, like you don't even need to worry too much about tech. We haven't started building anything yet. All we did was we went on Figma, like created a mock-up template, and as long as you can show your vision visually, like your app can change. Like, let's say if you start building everything now, and then like someone, your customers say like, we actually don't want this feature, and you just wasted money and resource building this. So it's honestly enough, even just like a sketch on paper. Of course, when you bring it to investors and other people, but something more sophisticated like Figma or other sort of like prototype apps can really go a long way. And you don't need technical knowledge for that. You just need like somewhat decent like design like eye or you can just ask your friends if that looks decent enough and you can there's tons of templates online as well, so nothing needs to be so difficult. And the more you like, if you're not embarrassed by your first mock-up, then you're working too hard on it and you're working too long on it, so
I think
yeah.
from this conversation, we'll wrap up in a minute. But like the biggest point I've got from this conversation with you is how far something like how far a mock-up can go with like a strong team, strong presenter, strong idea. and you can get
Hmm.
to that next stage. Like that's that from what I've spoken to you, like it seems like that, even though you've pivoted in different directions, it seems like that sort of theme has run really thick with like everything that you're doing.
100%. It's, honestly sales at the end of the day. When it comes to talking to accelerators, VCs, angels, it's like you're just selling your vision, right? And a vision enough is just, your voice and some sort of backup images to sort of validate your idea because people will see your potential. And that is more than enough.
That's amazing. I love that. So I think that's an amazing piece of advice for people listening is like, you don't need to build all the infrastructure, even if it's a really complicated idea, like anything in the Web3 at the moment. You don't need to build like your own blockchain or anything like that. You don't need to do it.
Hmm.
All you need is like a mock-up, and that will get a strong idea, strong. That's like you need to do a lot of research, customer surveys, like all that type of thing, in order
Yes.
to be able to go
Hmm.
to that next stage of like raising some investment from angels or VCs, because then you can actually get to a stage where you can build the technology to implement. So yeah, I love that message that you're spreading. Yeah, we have to wrap up the podcast there. It was such a pleasure having you on the episode. It was so nice.
Thank you so
How
much,
can people stay in
Sina.
touch with you and what you're doing?
Yeah, so if you have any, I'm super happy to help out. If anyone has any sort of founder troubles or wanting to talk about entrepreneurship, I'm really passionate about it. So you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in the idea of Iconic, you can go on geticonic.xyz and sign up for the waitlist. So yeah, thank you so much, Sina.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll chat very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.